Everybody else?
Yeah.
At work, we have a 2-minute rule that we get started. Some people do it, some people don't. Sometimes you just want me to start showing up 2 minutes late. All right, well, we do have 2 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get this started. Good evening, everybody that's here. Thanks for coming, and for those online, glad you guys could join as well. My name is Jeff Johnson, for those that I haven't met, Planning Council President. We have the rest of Planning Council here as well, with the exception of one person. And really the point of this evening is just to allow, really a Q&A. We don't have anything prepared, at least, from an introductory standpoint. We did send out some communication with the Q&A on the PPP loan that we received last year. And the point of the meeting tonight really is to answer any questions you guys have, at least to the best of our knowledge, or at least take some of those questions back if we don't have answers, so that we can formally educate you guys prior to the August 29th annual meeting, where we will be voting on whether or not to repay that loan or to keep the loan, the dollars from the loan that we have today. So unless anybody else says anything that they wanted to start with, I think we can just kind of fire away from questions. The folks here in the room, feel free to jump in as you want. And I think Pastor Tim is going to unmute some folks, or no, if you're online, you need to unmute yourself to ask the question.
If they're online, they're going to write it in the chat.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. With that, who's first?
My first question, does the Small Business Administration have any way of enforcing what we do with money? In other words, if we choose to use this for some purpose other than payroll protection, are they going to be aware of it, made aware of it, or?
We actually already used it for that, because as we were paying payroll, the bank put the money from the loan into our checking account to use that money to pay payroll, and then we took money from our savings, or from our general budget, and put it back into the savings account. So it was kind of, we used it, but we also put it aside.
Yeah, so I think, for all intents and purposes, and that's the reason why the loan was forgiven, because it was used from the Small Business Administration standpoint. That money has been used and has been forgiven. As Steve said, we've saved that money and moved it back in there to kind of replace it. But that money that the government gave us is gone for all intents and purposes from their standpoint. Good question.
Well, that brings up two questions for me. Apparently, we got $75,780, and we're now at 69. Is that $6,000 difference what you just talked about?
I think the way that it works is we were granted up to $75,000, but through the payroll that we submitted, and then we ultimately received 69,000. So we never received the full.
You did not receive 75.
Right, that's correct.
Feet. Okay.
So
Yeah, and I apologize for that. I was a bit confused about that at the beginning, because the whole thing was going to be
Jimmy, you got one more?
Jeff, you got a question?
No, you said you had two. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I said you said you had two questions. Go ahead.
You just mentioned something that I'm still puzzling about. I've done a lot of reading. You say our loan is forgiven by the lender. What does that mean to you?
What does that mean to me?
Yeah.
To me, they gave us money. They gave us a loan,
Yes,
and loans you are required to pay back.
correct.
In this situation, because we met the stipulations that the PPP loan had in place, they for all intents and purposes, forgave us paying back that loan. They said, you know, that was basically turned into a gift.
So it's a grant, basically, another way of saying it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Why in the world are we voting to give it back if it's a gift? Are we voting on the right thing here?
That's a great question, Jim. I
See, I did a lot
Yeah,
of reading on
yeah.
the SBA stuff,
yeah,
and I could not come up with anything other than this became a grant. And it's done. Why would we vote any different?
I'll give you my stance on this, the Jeff Johnson personal stance, and then anybody else can add in. I think there's probably some church rules on why we truly have to vote on this. I agree with you on this. It seems odd that basically a grant was given to us and forgiven. There's no payback of that. But I believe we have to vote on it because we were given a large sum of money. Steve, I'm gonna have to turn to you on that. I don't know the rules on why we have to vote on giving.
Yeah,
it back.
we do not in fact have to vote on whether to keep the money, but constitutionally, we are required to have the congregation vote on how to spend it. In the
I
same way-
understand that completely.
Excuse me?
I understand that completely, but it flat out says that we're going to vote on whether to return the funds or keep the funds.
Correct.
We're not going to vote on that.
Well, we could, in theory, we could go back to the Small Business Administration and say we voted as a congregation and we decided that it's in the best interest of to return that. We don't know the mechanics of how that would work, but that is what we're doing. So.
And I will say, Jim, that there's been others that have expressed their opinion that they don't think we should keep this money, that we should give it back for several reasons. Everyone's got their own opinion on that. And so I think circling back around, I think that's why we are going to place a vote on it. Again, do we have to? Maybe not, but there's been, go ahead.
But be clear on what we're voting. Tell me again what we're voting on.
We are voting on whether we retain the money that we got or
Okay,
whether we return that money to the Small Business
based
Administration.
on the material that's been given out. Does it say anywhere that the money we have is a gift and it's not required to be paid back?
I
I
don't
haven't
think
read
that's-
it in any of this.
No.
So that has to be understood, in my opinion, before the vote.
That's good. Very fair point. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we do need to make that clear. And the conversation that arose from some members who brought up paying it back came from a concern about separation of church and state.
Yeah. I for one, at the beginning of this, thought this was really dumb. We have, number one, no reason to ask for the money because we've got money. That's what's been told to us. We have no minutes for any meetings during 2020. So I have no idea what was voted on, what was the margin, what have you. And until I did my own reading, now I have to say it's illogical. Oh, let me say one other thing. The requirements for this money, the 69,000, basically that's what we received, right?
Mhm.
We have to use 60% of it for salaries. That's in the grant, right?
Yeah, correct. At least 60%. We use, I think all of what we used was on salary.
Well, that's all right. I mean, it says use the other 40% for lollipops or something. I don't know.
I think it was mainly for business expenses, mortgages, stuff like that, which we don't have. So that's where, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted, that's two things that have to be very, very clear to people who are going to vote on this, in my opinion. because nobody knows that yet unless they spend a week looking at this.
Yeah, and to go back to one of your first statements, I think the reason why there was no vote on when we took out the loan, and then also to your question about we didn't need the money, so why did we ask for it? At the time that the loan came out, it was a very short, quick process.
Yeah.
And where we were with COVID, we had no idea. We had no idea what our income was going to be, and so the choice was made like, okay, let's do this. We can pay it back down the road if we need to. So that's why there was no votes on securing the loan and why we did secure.
That's why I was taken by the fact that in February, where did I find this, in February 21st, the 11th, it says that the council voted 5-4 to repay the loan. Explain that now.
Yep.
In the minutes, that vote failed. It was 5 against 4. Well, it says it in the minutes.
No, it was 5 in favor to recommend.
Well, if it says in the minutes, it was a
I'm
typo
sorry,
on that.
but that's
So-
not what it says in the minutes. Somebody wrote these minutes and distributed them. And that's why I'm trying to figure out what's what. Then it says we had a second vote, which was passed 6-3. That means we're going to keep the loan. That was also on February 11th this year.
Yeah, so let me.
Well, let's
so
the
let
other
me-
way around. It was-
One of them has to fail and one of them has
So
to.
let me talk about a couple of those things. So the first vote that we did was not whether or not to keep the loan or to repay the loan, because as a council, we can't make that decision. We chose that's gonna be a vote by the congregation, which we're gonna do on the 29th. The vote was for a recommendation from the council, and that's it.
Okay.
Because we thought we were gonna vote on this several months ago, when we thought, okay, we have to make a decision whether we're paying this back or whether we're keeping it. Shortly after that, I don't remember what meeting it was in, after doing some research, we found out that if we said, okay, we're not gonna ask for forgiveness, we're gonna pay this loan back, we were gonna be charged interest on that.
Right.
So even though we weren't using, we were gonna be charged interest on it, and we thought, that's probably not the best way to do this, the best use of funds, et cetera, to pay for this, whether or not, if we're not gonna keep it. So that's where we made the vote. I think that's the vote you're referencing, the 6-3 to ask for the forgiveness, which was granted shortly afterwards. And because that was happening and we no longer had to press a vote to the congregation on whether to keep it or not, we realized, okay, we have this money, it's been forgiven, we can hold that to the annual meeting. So that, I believe that's what the two votes you're
There are
referencing.
some members of this congregation that have absolutely nothing to do in their life. So they read this. And then the motion says it was passed, and then it comes out and says that failed. So you had a second vote, which wasn't in the motion or in the minutes of February. I get a little confused as to what the heck's going on.
Yeah, well, I can see that, and I apologize for if there was any misprint in the notes, but I do know, as I was there, that the first vote, the recommendation was 5 people for recommending paying it back, 4 people for recommending keeping it.
And I think, the planning council spent a lot of months just navigating this whole situation, and it's not only, what the loan we have and repaying the loan, but it got a little bit into also kind of what we ethically think about it, the state versus church, and well, it's a grant, why would we keep it, is what you're saying. A lot of us think that, right? So it became a bigger question to all of us, and it's kind of continued with the months, which is why we brought it to and are trying to make it work for the congregation now.
Like I said earlier, I was definitely against this, but it turned out to be a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it changes as our finances change each month since this process started, right? So the vote could change again anytime in someone's mind, because we're in a different financial situation now than the first time we talked about it. So I think that's an important piece of this, and that's why it has come to this point of having a big discussion involving everyone, and making it clear.
Now, I think the only other comment I have.
You're like 8 questions over here
Can
too.
we,
No, I'm just giving you a hard time. You got another one?
But there was another question. Yeah, there's 2 of them over here.
Okay.
I had a question in regards. The bulletin that came out with the notice about this is the first time I saw in black and white, nonprofit could obtain this money. Did it come out that way when you first were notified about this, that nonprofits could get this money?
Yes.
See, I haven't seen anything that was written, and that's why I haven't done the research that Jim has, and maybe Jim has a better aspect of when it came out.
the Small Business Administration opened it up to, the point here was, a lot of companies are facing, do we need to lay people off?
I understand that, and there were a lot of small businesses that did not get this loan or grant that should have, or bigger businesses that might not have needed it, got it. And I'm not going into that arena, I'm just pointing out why I'm bringing this nonprofit up.
And the SBA did expand it to nonprofits, so they wanted to expand that to nonprofits. So that was
Yeah, there were several versions of this before they ever got to nonprofits. It's loan from the SBA. And it was not originally given to nonprofits.
Yeah, I don't
I
remember.
remember.
Well, it started in 2019, late.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
The other question that I have is, if we were to keep this, is there an amount of money, percentage or whatever, that we'd have to pay to keep it? I mean, what would be the penalty?
0 penalty. The money is ours. Honestly, if the congregation chooses to repay this, we've gotten the answer that we can. We would have to do some additional, unless you found out like how to pay it back, but it's our money. We would literally be writing them a check, not repaying something, but writing them a check at this point.
And that's a good question, because that leads to another thing we tried to make clear, but it bears repeating. If we had simply kept the money without seeking forgiveness, when we paid it back, we would have incurred a 1% fee for paying it back. The reason we had the loan forgiven is that then gave us the option of keeping the money or paying it back without owing it.
Yeah.
I won't go into a lot of detail, I haven't thought a great deal about it, but I sometimes feel because the church is involved, we have a moral issue also involved here. And it is a gift. And if there's any institution that has a lot of experience with gifts, it certainly should be churches. And a gift is a gift. And we have received a gift, and I think the gift should be used properly. Now, if you don't use it properly, then I think morally we're not right. So if it's a gift and it's to be used, for a good reason, and the reason that it was intended for was small business related, and that small business problems in the small business don't exist here, then why can't we keep the money as a gift, since we have it in our hands as a gift, and give it as a gift to another institution, a benevolent group, a sponsor company with the name Joe, for example, where it will be used as a gift. I'm not in favor of it being paid to gas and electricity, because I think the church is in good enough shape, you can handle that. So the money, if it's a gift, it should be used as a gift. It's my point. If we can't use it as a gift, if we don't need it to operate, which was the intent, why give it back to the government? And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm wrong most of the time. There's still a lot of money left available to small businesses that's not being used yet. Am I correct or incorrect?
It's closed.
That's my understanding, am I right? If that's the case, that influences me a great deal and give it, not give it back.
Yeah.
Because if they already have the money, why give it back?
Yeah.
I would rather give it to, but I can't. Thank you. Or any other institution within our control, if we can consider that as part of our staff.
Yeah, I think, you know, at this point, we can use the money in however the church best feels fit. It no longer has to go towards staff or lighting or electricity. How we use that money, if we choose to keep it, is a much larger conversation, a much bigger, probably a lot of people with a lot of different thoughts on how we can use it best, either within the church here or with helping others from a gift standpoint. So if we choose to keep the money, then I am sure there will be teams formed and all kinds of focus groups and ideas on how we can use that. And I think everybody looks forward to that if we do keep the money, to say, okay, how many great things can we do with this? And so, but that won't be solved, you know, in the next 2 weeks, because we really want everybody to be involved in that.
I would trust that would be done.
Yeah.
So, and so my point is that if it's not needed by the government, since they already have money available, then why don't you use it for the good and give it to people that have a need? Don't pay gas off, don't build up good.
Yep.
Can I clarify what you said though?
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought this money was supposed to be used to pay salaries.
It was used to
So,
pay
yeah,
salaries.
so
Yeah.
what you're saying is, we would use it to pay salaries. We divert additional funds that we have in the church to do what you say.
Yeah.
So it's a little different than the way you described it. It has to be used for salaries in this institution. That's why it was given to us.
Yeah. So it was used for salaries.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's already been used.
Yeah.
If we want to take the money from our budget, that was earmarked to do that, and now redirect it somewhere, that's what you're suggesting.
Yes, correct.
Which would be a conversation at a later point. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for laying that out.
I'm just, again, facts, it's very important.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Any questions online, Tim?
Nothing, so, oh, we got one that just came in.
Just,
They're waiting.
So if we don't pay back the money, question comes from Denny and Sharon Frick. And this, I think we have an answer to this, but what account would it be put in? Would the congregation know where or how it would be spent? Would it be needed to be voted on how it's spent by the congregation? Do you want to take that?
Go for
Okay, so I mean, basically what to reiterate what Jeff has said, the money has already been, we're gonna have to say this probably a million times at the annual meeting too, just to be really clear with people. The money has already been spent on the things that the government earmarked it for. We just happen to now have a surplus of that amount that we now have to figure out what to do with. Our meeting, however, on the 29th is just about whether to use that money to pay back what was originally supposed to be a loan, but is now a grant, because of some concerns that some members had around separation of church and state. What we do with that money is now, if we vote to keep it, right, is we will be making a decision about what to do with that bit of surplus that we have. And that's going to be a longer conversation that's going to take place over the course of several months, I'm sure, following the determination one way or the other if we're keeping it or not. So on the 29th, it's only voting to keep it whether or not, but as with everything in our budget, it will be seen in the budget, it will be reflected in the budget numbers, and specifically how it is allocated around will be a matter of discussion.
And I think the other thing,
It's in the savings right now.
And let me clarify too, when Tim says we will make a decision how to spend the money, the we is you, the congregation, not the planning council. So it's the congregation, in the same way that the congregation makes a choice how to spend all of our budgeted funds. It's the congregation that will make the decision, how to spend this money. The planning council's role will be to complete the process to come to that decision.
And I think along with the how to spend the money, also when to spend the money. There's nothing that says we have to spend it this year or next year or in a certain time frame. So it can very much be, we want to earmark a third of this, for each of the next 3 years and do these types of things. Or maybe we earmark a third of it and we vote on what to do with that third of it. And as the next year comes up, we continue to look at the state of the church, the opportunities we have to gift to others.
But again, this is the temptation we're gonna keep running into, is already starting to try and get in the weeds of how to spend it, when really the conversation for the 29th is simply limited to, do we send it back or do we keep it for use?
Tim, did you need that, did the church need that money at the time it's spent?
I mean, so
Yeah, we didn't know.
we thought so. Yeah,
You either needed it or you.
no, it's a little more complicated than that. Yeah, because we didn't know what effect the pandemic was going to have on our communities. And if you remember, it was distributed so early during lockdown that we had no idea how that was going to shake out for our community. For most people who received that loan, it was preemptively cushioning the possibility that revenue would drop drastically.
So in other words, if you had not received it, the church would close its doors.
No, see, we don't know that. See, that's the thing, is at the time, we couldn't tell the future. We couldn't tell if that was going to happen. The worst case scenario fear was yes.
I will say that had we not received the money, because of the uncertainty of what would come in the future, we would have had conversations on the planning council about how to deal with expenses. And, and the most fungible expense that we have is staff. So we would have had conversations about, in the short term and the medium term, do we need to do something about our staffing level, so that we're not spending beyond what we fear we may not bring in.
And along with not knowing what our situation was going to be, we didn't have the opportunity to kind of wait and see. There was a very short time window in which you could apply for this.
Yeah.
So we had to act on it.
So in other words, you use it for what it was intended to be used.
Yes, yeah.
And so as a result of that, we have this money that could be considered gifted.
Yes.
That's where we're at.
Could be then given.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm kind of slow on the uptake here, but I've heard too many comments about where we are at this. We have received the money, has it in total been spent on wages?
Yes.
So if the grant, the whatever, is in all intents and purposes gone,
Yes.
it has been replaced by the money we didn't spend. Okay.
Correct.
I'm good.
Yep. You're right.
No,
on that.
that's,
You're right.
We didn't have to dip into our savings as much as we thought, for example, right?
Yeah, I think we're
We had
gonna,
a
on the
smaller
29th, we're gonna have an initial conversation where we just say that exactly. Yeah,
Oh.
that's,
yeah, because it's really not.
it's confusing. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to satisfy, what are we gonna use the money for? I agree, that's something else.
Well, I can
It's
say
clear now
If the
that
whole thing was confusing on your end, man, you should.
It's confusing. It's been confusing, yes, yeah.
well, I looked at some of the forms that had to be filled out. Who did them? I mean,
You did, yeah, so
they were way
you
beyond
worked
mine.
through that, yeah, you worked through the bank. And then Christine Ventrelli, Steve and I worked through the mechanics of it. But yeah, so it was unprecedented in regards to the PPP loan coming together in like a matter of, remember March 2020 there. We just don't know what the economy's going to do. We don't know if we're all going to have a job. What is the response? And so the government just wants to step in. And they passed this with, as far as the government goes.
You know, whatever you guys did.
The Federal Reserve is still printing money.
Yes, they are.
Let's not get into politics.
Yeah, back here.
When was our loan for PFF?
It was in May of 2020.
So the council vote then in 21 was long after we knew that we had this and then.
No, we took the vote.
Yeah, so there was a vote earlier this year in February, I think it was, on what our recommendation was. And then I believe there was another vote right before we went to ask for forgiveness to say, should we ask for forgiveness because it was going to save us that 1% if we did pay it back. And then when we applied for the forgiveness after, we said, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. Why would we take the risk of giving back 1 extra percent? The paperwork and the response on when we asked for forgiveness and when they gave us forgiveness was also a matter of a week or two, I think.
Yeah, you voted.
Yeah, we were facing the,
February, and you were notified of the forgiveness on the 4th of March.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
on the 4th of March, the forgiveness came up. I don't recall.
Well, that's what somebody wrote here.
Well, so the way that it worked was from a big picture on it, regardless of the dates, was, so we talked about what we should do with this money. We took the money out in the springtime of 2020 in 1 year time frame. Either have to repay it as a loan or you apply for forgiveness. And we knew that we weren't going to be able to have an annual meeting in April to decide what to do with it. So we made the decision, apply for forgiveness. We won't do anything with the money, and then we'll vote at the annual meeting here in August on what should we do with it. But that was sort of we did have a 1 year term on the loan where we had to decide, are we going to pay this back as a loan or pay 1% interest or apply for forgiveness? And that's
So it wasn't forgiven in 2020, it was forgiven in 2021.
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
I thought I heard you saying that.
Yeah, we received the funds in 2020, and then you go through this process of you have to put together, okay, what payroll dollars did you actually spend? Did you maintain all your staffing? What was the utility bills, et cetera? You submit that to the SBA, and then they apply for it, and that came out.
Well, that needs to be made much more clear, I think, to people what the process is, that it is a gift, not, here you were voting to pay back, but you didn't know it was forgiven. So I mean, I guess I'm following.
Yeah, I know we have that timeline. Maybe we just need to clean that timeline up a little.
That would help a timeline set up that could be on a screen.
That's a good idea. Yeah, we'll do that.
I'm not trying to say where money should go, but I want you all to understand. I went back a few years to, I was on the council. And right as I was coming on, individuals were going off and they came up with a priority for projects that needed to be done, i.e. the boiler was one. Other things have come along. We've gotten carpet in the narthex, in the office area. The sanctuary has been mentioned. Going back, I don't remember the exact verbiage, I forgot that set of notes. But there was something having to do with $10,000 a year for 5 years, so we had $50,000 in the savings account as a cushion above everything else. And I'm wondering where that is are we sitting at $50,000 separated from everything else at this point? I'm not looking for an answer right now, but I think this is something that should be addressed at our annual meeting. Secondly, have there been any other projects, list of projects within the sanctuary or the grounds? Well, I'll back up, the parking lot and the outer entrance, cement sidewalk have been repaired. These were on that list, and I'm wondering if there's been any other listings made, because I have some new ones that could go on there. And I'm not saying them at this time. What I'm getting at is we need to also look back where we have come from in regards to taking care of this place so that it doesn't fall out from under us like some sinkhole.
Yeah. And that'll be part of that future conversation.
And that can be, but I'm telling you right now, that could come up at the annual meeting, and by having some answers for that, when I was on a project committee, We had one individual come in from outside telling us how to go about doing this, and I remember one thing he said, no matter where you're at with your congregation, with your finances, you should always have some kind of capital fund campaign going on in your church. And by doing so, you have, it could be 2 or 3, but you would have money going to those projects so that when the money is there, the project will be taken care of.
Yeah.
But a minimum of 1.
Yeah, so Russ, I mean, and because the vote on the 29th is limited to whether or not we write the check, we do have a response to that, and our response is, we are aware of the project that needs to be going on, there is a consistent list that we know we have, but that is not at issue right now.
No, it's not, but it's gonna be brought up.
We know, and that's our response, is we're not going to go into the weeds and the details of that. We know it's going to be brought up, but we're gonna have to kind of stay stalwart and say, we're only talking about whether or not we're gonna pay it back.
Is that keeping the congregation in the dark? I mean, I really, I hear what both of you were saying, but I feel like I have no idea where money's coming from for all the stuff needs that has to be repaired, the sewer upstairs, the kitchen, the dishwasher. I mean, I don't know what the church's budget looks like as a congregation member. So how do we know all that to stay kind of good?
No, fair points. I think to both your points. So I think there's 2 different things. So the annual meeting is an annual meeting about several things with the church. For this portion, we are not going to talk about where we're going to spend money. We're voting on whether or not we're going to keep it or not. At the annual meeting, if there's questions on those things, not necessarily where we're spending this money, but if there's questions about the improvements that have been made and where that money has come from, I think we can definitely talk to that. I can tell you, majority of what we've seen happen around here lately over the last year or so have all been from, special offerings and givings and donations to do the carpet and some of the other things we've done. Some of the other things have happened due to insurance issues, the pipes breaking. And so that's where some of the improvements have been made there. I'm not aware of anything outside of that, any special monies we pulled from the budget to do any of those types of things. But we can definitely look at that over the next couple of weeks and try and get some definitive answers for you. And Russ, to your point, as far as are we setting aside $10,000 every year? I don't think we are. I wasn't part of those conversations. I don't think we've had $10,000 always goes into savings. Whatever overage we've had has been going into savings.
And
I'm not pushing that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
So, because
can I more fully answer Mary Ann's question? We'll be voting on whether to repay the loan after the financial report at the annual meeting.
Only those who are there. So those of us who are not there can't vote because we
That's
can't go on the Zoom and you can't have a absentee ballot. So, yeah, so then some people go.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that's too bad that more congregation members can't.
Well, I mean, constitutionally, our hands are tough. Last time we allowed voting remotely because we made a decision in the extremist that was more the way to do it. Now, we can do it differently. We can do it according to the Constitution because we can have. So there's no provision in the Constitution for proxy voting. There's no provision in the Constitution for absentee voting or for remote voting. So we are simply following the constitutional requirements.
I had a follow-up comment
Yeah, Russ.
that should remind me of. And that is, as a governing body for this church, I want you to know that as far as the sewage backup downstairs is concerned, the drains for to be replaced by a I don't recall, there's a ball in there, so any sewage backup will not come spilling back into the building. And I didn't know this at the time I was doing work in the kitchen as to I thought it was just remodeling being done. As a governing body, it is my understanding that the architect that supposedly working down there with them had brushed that thought about that anti-siphon or sewer
Check that.
check valve
There you go.
in that floor drain, he kind of brushed it aside. I want you to know that at this particular state of what's going on down there as the governing body, you have the right to put your foot down and say, that's gonna be replaced. We don't want this to happen again. We don't want the insurance company to come down on us and cancel because it happened once, now it's happened again and they're not gonna pay. And if it's gonna take people to come up with some money for that to be done, I'll raise my hand right away and say, I'll put money towards it. I'm not gonna buy the whole thing. But the thing is, this is what I was talking about, inside and out this building, we gotta take care of. We found that there's a problem. Let's fix it so it's not a problem again.
Don't claim to be a great plumbing mind. You know, haven't been, you know, intimately involved in those repairs, but I think definitely it's something we can talk through, but I appreciate you bringing it up.
It was brought up to me last weekend in conversation. It wasn't brought to me, but in conversation, I picked up that information.
Gotcha.
I don't know if the architect, if there is even one, or if it's a project manager, brush that aside or not, but it's something as the governing body, you have a right to put your foot down and say, that's gonna be done because it's gonna protect this building.
Yep, yeah, like I said, don't know anything about
And
that.
that's what I'm trying to bring up here. That's something that probably you don't know, you know of, but don't know some of the finer details that somebody should take a look at.
Appreciate that.
Another part of that issue is that the church needs to clean it out to the street now. That's done, so that is our responsibility as for those things.
Yep. So, you know, and I could go through a whole good list of things, but I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to bring up things that you need to be aware of, that we need to get back on track, so to speak, so we take care of some of this stuff.
Well, I think as a council and congregation, we can look at the budget, make sure being fiscally responsible for now and the future and things for capital improvements future and past, right? Make sure every pocket is covered and every line item is kind of
Well,
touched on. It doesn't matter if it's the carpet or the sewer or a donation to Guatemala, right? All of these are part of the budget, so we'll just be conscious of those areas and make sure that we're clear and questions are answered.
Or things that come up that aren't in the budget.
Exactly, that's part of the budget, right? That's, we have a
Yeah,
building and a ground, so that is part of it. So it's, and then we should think about with that extra money is, did we need it? Do we want it? It's not necessarily always the question. It's, were we responsible? If we didn't need it?
Well, then it goes back into savings. Or if a project has X number of dollars put into it, i.e. the carpeting, for instance, we've had 2 areas now. I know the sanctuary's been mentioned. Okay, we have little campaigns, once money is there, we do it. What I'm getting at is, if we had items that we need to, this is our priority, or this is our list. Prioritizing is one thing, but keep maintaining a list. Having a campaign bring money in. Extra money outside of, or above what's going on with the church itself.
Any other questions around the repayment or non-repayment or the loan itself? Any other questions online? Jim?
Nope. I just have one clarification. We got 16 days till the annual meeting. Are we gonna get something in writing that clarifies the things that we've talked about tonight that might be a little?
Yeah, we're gonna have to work through some of that. I don't know when we actually send out the official agendas and all that kind of stuff.
The
From a light-
agenda will be actually sent out by email tomorrow, will be available as a paper copy on Sunday. Next Friday, the full annual report will be emailed out and will be available as paper copies on Sunday, the 22nd. We have not planned on sending out notes from this meeting, but we can certainly do that.
Well, I thought that we had at least some agreement that there's some confusing statements here.
Yeah, I think there's.
We need to know, I mean, if I'm gonna vote, I need to know that I'm voting on money that I don't have to pay back, but I could.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think there's some of those things that we can clarify as well as the timeline. We're gonna have to work, I don't think that'll be available in the annual report. But I think it's something that we can hopefully have available. I think we should target to have some reclarification of some of that stuff available at least by Sunday, the 22nd. And then we can send that out via email as well. I don't know if that's doable, but I think that's something we can work towards. Yeah.
Well, I think Mr. Furman had a very good idea about if it's a gift, using it as a gift.
Well, we're not
I mean,
doing
we're
that.
not, I know, but
You got it,
what I'm getting at is that needs to be clarified in those notes.
Let's just.
But I'm not gonna clarify that in the
Okay.
notes. We'll clarify that, it's for all intents and purposes a gift at this point, but I'll refrain from anything about how we should use it or could use it.
But you can't just say that will be determined.
I'd like to have some.
Yes, yes.
Just make sure you clarify that, because you're right, if you put that money in, you want to know. So I think making sure you're really clear about that too. Is important.
Totally. Still nothing online?
What's that?
Still nothing
All
online,
right.
so I think we have
Well, I think
some
there's
of our
nothing-
marching orders to
Yeah,
do here.
if there's nothing online and nothing more here, then I think we can conclude it. Oh,